The sound of my own tibia snapping echoed off the vaulted ceilings of our Hamptons estate. It was a sickening crunch that silenced the storm outside. I lay crumpled at the bottom of the floating marble staircase, gasping for air as white-hot pain seared through my right leg. I looked up through tears, expecting to see horror on my husband Julian's face. Instead, I saw him checking his reflection in the hallway mirror, straightening his tie as if I were nothing more than a spilled glass of wine. He stepped over my twisted body without missing a beat and pulled his phone from his pocket. I reached out a trembling hand, thinking he was dialing 911. "Please," I whispered, the agony making my vision blur. Julian looked down at me, his eyes cold and empty. He pressed the phone to his ear. "Chloe, you can come in now," he said calmly. "The problem has been handled." My heart stopped. He was not calling an ambulance. He was calling his mistress. The woman I had just tried to throw out of my own house. The woman whose cheap perfume now filled the air as the heavy front door opened. "My name is Brianna." And at that moment, lying broken on the cold floor, I realized my marriage was not just over. It was a death trap. But Julian made a fatal mistake that night. He forgot that before I was his quiet, obedient wife, I was a girl raised on the streets. And he definitely forgot that my brother is not just a logistics businessman, but the most feared kingpin on the East Coast. Before I tell you how I turned his life into a living nightmare from a hospital bed, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that like and subscribe button if you have ever been pushed too far and decided to push back. You are going to want to see how this ends. The nightmare began just 3 minutes before the fall. I had found Chloe's diamond earrings on my nightstand right next to our wedding photo. When I confronted them in the living room, Julian did not apologize or make excuses. He simply grabbed my arm. "You think you are the lady of this house?" he sneered, his grip bruising my skin. "You are nothing but a guard dog I bought with a wedding ring. You do not get to bark at the guests. Know your place, Brianna." Then he shoved me. Hard. He watched with satisfaction as I lost my balance and fell backward down the stairs. Now I watched helplessly as Chloe walked into the foyer, her heels clicking rhythmically on the floor. She looked at my shattered leg and laughed. A cruel, high-pitched sound that made my skin crawl. "Oh, poor thing," she mocked, looking down at me. "Does it hurt?" She stepped intentionally close to my injured leg, forcing me to stifle a scream. Julian grabbed me by the back of my silk blouse. He did not help me stand. He began to drag me across the floor toward the heavy oak door of the underground wine cellar. I screamed as the movement sent shockwaves of pain through my body, my fingernails scratching uselessly against the polished wood floor, leaving streaks of blood. "You need a timeout," Julian said, opening the cellar door. "Somewhere to cool off while the adults celebrate." He threw me into the darkness. I tumbled down the short flight of wooden steps, landing hard on the cold concrete floor. The heavy door slammed shut above me. Then came the sound of the deadbolt sliding into place. Click. I was trapped in the pitch-black dark with a broken leg, listening to the muffled sound of my husband and his mistress popping a bottle of vintage champagne directly above my head. They thought I was finished. They thought I would die in there or beg for mercy. But as I lay there in the dark, clutching my throbbing leg, I did not cry. I reached into my bra and pulled out the one thing Julian did not know I had. A burner phone. My hands shook as I dialed the only number that mattered. It rang once. "Hello, Dante," I whispered into the darkness. "It is Bree. I need you to bring the boys. I am ready to go to war." The darkness in the cellar was not just an absence of light. It was a physical weight pressing down on my chest, suffocating me slowly. Every breath was a jagged shard of glass in my lungs. My leg throbbed with a rhythm that matched the frantic beating of my heart. A hot, sickening pulse of agony that radiated from my shin all the way up to my hip. I tried to shift my weight to alleviate the pressure, but a fresh wave of nausea washed over me, leaving me gasping on the cold concrete. Above me, the floorboards creaked. I heard the muffled thump of heavy footsteps, followed by the distinct, sharp clatter of high heels. Then came the laughter. It was light and airy and completely devoid of guilt. It drifted down through the ceiling vents, mocking me. Listening to them sparked a fire in my belly that burned hotter than the pain in my leg. I closed my eyes tight and suddenly the darkness shifted. I was not in a cold cellar anymore. I was back in our living room 3 years ago, standing on the plush beige carpet Julian insisted we buy. That was the day the isolation began. I remembered the look of disgust on his face as he scrolled through my phone, which he had demanded to inspect. He had found a text message from Dante. It was innocent enough, just my brother checking in asking if I was happy. Julian had thrown the phone onto the sofa as if it were contaminated. "You need to cut them off, Brianna," he had said, his voice smooth and reasonable, the way a parent speaks to a slow child. "We are building a life here, a respectable life. We are climbing the social ladder, and we cannot drag that kind of baggage with us." I had tried to argue. I tried to tell him that Dante was a businessman now that the streets were behind him. Julian had just laughed. "A thug in a suit is still a thug," he sneered. "You want to be the wife of a CEO, or do you want to be the sister of a criminal? You cannot be both." I chose him. I blocked Dante's number. I stopped going to Sunday dinners. I cut off the only people who would have burned the world down to save me. I did it because I loved Julian. Or because I thought I did. A sharp spasm in my leg snapped me back to the freezing cellar. I let out a low, guttural groan. My throat felt like it was filled with sand. I needed water. I could hear the faint drip of a pipe somewhere in the back of the room near the utility sink. It sounded miles away. I gritted my teeth and dug my elbows into the rough concrete. I began to drag myself, inch by agonizing inch. My broken leg dragged behind me a dead weight of useless flesh and shattered bone. Each movement sent white sparks dancing across my vision. As I crawled through the dust, the smell of the cellar filled my nose. Damp wood, mold, and something else, something expensive. The smell triggered another memory, one that hit me harder than the physical pain. It was 6 months ago. I was sitting at the kitchen island staring at a credit card statement, a charge for $12,000 at the Hermes boutique in Manhattan, my salary, the bonus I had worked overtime for months to earn. When Julian walked in, I confronted him. I was shaking not with fear, but with confusion. I asked him why he spent my entire bonus on a bag. He didn't even look up from his tablet. "It is a client gift, Brianna," he said dismissively, pouring himself a scotch. "We are trying to close the deal with the Nakamura Group. Mrs. Nakamura loves Birkins. You should be happy your little job can contribute to the family legacy." I believed him. I felt guilty for doubting him. I felt proud that I could help. 2 weeks later, I saw that bag. It wasn't on the arm of Mrs. Nakamura. It was on Chloe's arm at the company gala. A bright orange Birkin that cost more than my first car. When I looked at Julian, he just winked at me and mouthed the words, "Trust me." I swallowed my rage that night. I swallowed it just like I was swallowing the bile rising in my throat now. I finally reached the wall. My hand brushed against something cold and glass. I froze. My eyes adjusted to the gloom, and I realized what I was touching. It wasn't a water pipe. It was a rack of wine. But not just any wine. I ran my fingers over the labels, tracing the embossed letters in the dark. Chateau Margaux 2009, Screaming Eagle Cabernet. These were not Julian's bottles. He knew nothing about wine. He only drank what was trendy. These were mine. I had spent years collecting them, scouring auctions, saving pennies from my paycheck, hiding them away for a special occasion. For our 5th anniversary. For the day we finally paid off the mortgage. I heard the pop of a cork upstairs. The sound was like a gunshot. Then the sound of liquid pouring into crystal glasses. "That is excellent." Chloe's voice drifted down. Julian's voice followed, rich with unearned pride. "Only the best for you, babe." I felt a tear slide down my cheek, but it wasn't from sadness. It was from pure, unadulterated hatred. He was drinking my wine. He was celebrating his victory over me with the very vintage I had bought to celebrate our future. He was pouring my sacrifice down the throat of the woman who helped him break my leg. I looked at the bottles next to me. In the dark, they looked like soldiers, silent, waiting. I realized then that Julian saw everything I owned as his, my money, my body, my past, my future. He thought he had stripped me of everything. He thought that by cutting me off from Dante, he had left me defenseless. He thought that by breaking my leg, he had immobilized me. But as I gripped the neck of a heavy wine bottle, feeling its cold weight in my hand, I realized he was wrong. He hadn't stripped me of my past. He had just forced me to remember it. He had forced me to remember that before I was Brianna the archivist, I was Bree from the block. And Bree didn't need a lawyer to settle a score. I dragged myself another foot, my fingers finally finding the tap of the utility sink. I turned the handle. Water rusted and cold sputtered out. I cupped my hands and drank greedily, letting the metallic liquid wash away the taste of betrayal. I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand. The pain in my leg was still there, screaming and demanding attention, but the noise in my head had changed. The doubt was gone. The fear was gone. The hope that this was all a misunderstanding was gone. All that was left was a cold, hard clarity. I wasn't waiting for Dante to come and save me. I was waiting for Dante to come and help me burn this whole life to the ground. Up above, the music volume increased. They were dancing on my ceiling, dancing on my grave. I leaned my head back against the wine rack and closed my eyes, listening to the rhythm of their footsteps. "Enjoy it, Julian," I whispered into the darkness. "Dance while you still have legs to stand on. Because when my brother gets here, the music stops. Time loses its meaning when you are left in the dark." I did not know if it had been hours or days since Julian locked the heavy oak door. I only knew that the thirst had become a living thing in my throat, a dry claw scratching at my windpipe. The cold concrete floor had seeped into my bones, making my shattered leg throb with a dull, sickening rhythm that echoed the beat of my own heart. I had drifted in and out of consciousness, my mind conjuring fever dreams of water, of soft beds, of my mother's voice. But every time I woke up, I was still there, alone, broken, surrounded by the smell of dust and the mocking scent of expensive wine. My leg had swollen inside my pant leg, the fabric stretching tight against the inflamed skin. I could feel the heat radiating from it, a fever trapped beneath the silk. I had stopped calling for help. I knew no one was coming. The house was isolated, set back on acres of private land in the Hamptons. The only people who could hear me were the ones who put me here. Suddenly the lock clicked. The sound was deafening in the silence. I squinted as the heavy door swung open and blinding artificial light from the hallway flooded the cellar. I raised a trembling hand to shield my eyes, my other arm instinctively curling around my injured leg to protect it. Two silhouettes stood at the top of the stairs. Even in the glare, I recognized the sharp outline of Julian's tailored suit and the curvaceous figure of Chloe standing just behind him. They looked immaculate, clean, hydrated. The sight of them made bile rise in my empty stomach. Julian descended the stairs first, holding a handkerchief over his nose, as if I were a rotting carcass. Chloe followed him, holding a file folder and a glass of red wine. She looked around the cellar with a sneer of distaste, her eyes landing on me with zero empathy, only mild annoyance. "You look terrible, Brianna," Julian said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. He stopped a few feet away from me, careful not to let his Italian leather shoes touch the dirty floor where I lay. "I honestly expected better from you. The dramatics, the screaming. It is embarrassing, really." I tried to speak, but my voice was a croak. "I need a doctor, Julian. My leg, it is bad." He sighed, the sound of a disappointed father. I looked up at him, hoping to see a flicker of the man I married, the man who promised to protect me. But his eyes were like glass, hard, reflective, empty. He did not care that I was in pain. He only cared that I was an inconvenience. "We can call a doctor," he said, crouching down slightly but keeping his distance. "We can get you the best orthopedic surgeon in the state. We can have you in a private room with morphine within the hour. But first we need to handle some housekeeping." He snapped his fingers, and Chloe stepped forward, dropping the file folder onto my chest. It slid off and landed on the floor next to my hand. I looked at it. The bold letters at the top swam before my eyes. Petition for dissolution of marriage, and underneath that property transfer agreement. I looked back at him, my vision blurring. "You want me to sign divorce papers? Here, now." Julian nodded, checking his watch. "It is a simple arrangement, Brianna. You sign over your 50% share of the house and the rights to your investment portfolio. In exchange, I will not press charges against you for domestic disturbance and assault." I stared at him in disbelief. "Assault? You broke my leg, Julian," I whispered. He laughed, a short, sharp bark. Who is going to believe that? You have a history of mental instability, Brianna, or at least you will by tomorrow. We have already told the neighbors you had a breakdown, that you attacked Chloe in a jealous rage and fell down the stairs while I was trying to restrain you. If you sign these papers, we will get you help. We will send you to a nice, quiet facility. If you do not well, you can stay down here until you change your mind." He was bluffing. He had to be. But the look in his eyes told me he wasn't. He was desperate. I knew his company was bleeding money. I knew he needed the equity in this house to secure a loan. He needed my signature to save his ego. And he was willing to let me rot to get it. I pushed the papers away with my trembling hand. "Go to hell," I rasped. "I am not signing anything." Julian stood up, brushing invisible dust from his knees. His jaw tightened. "I was afraid you would say that." He looked at Chloe. "I think she needs some motivation." Chloe smiled, a slow, cruel curving of her red lips. She stepped closer, her heels clicking on the concrete. She looked down at my leg. The pant leg of my silk trousers had been torn during the fall, revealing the swollen, bruised skin of my shin. There was a nasty scrape where the bone had nearly pierced the skin, a raw, angry wound that pulsed with every heartbeat. "Infection is a nasty thing," Chloe said, swirling the wine in her glass. "You really should take better care of your wounds, Brianna. It looks inflamed. Maybe we should disinfect it." Before I could process her words, she tilted the glass. The dark red liquid poured out in a slow, deliberate stream, splashing directly onto the open scrape and the shattered bone beneath. The scream that tore from my throat did not sound human. It was a primal, animalistic shriek of pure agony. The alcohol in the wine hit the raw nerve endings like liquid fire. It seared through the open flesh, biting into the wound, mixing with the blood and the dirt. My body convulsed on the floor, my back arching as I clawed at the concrete, my fingernails breaking against the stone. The pain was blinding, white-hot and consuming. It drowned out everything else, the world narrowing down to the torture being inflicted on my shattered leg. Chloe watched with fascination, tilting the glass to get every last drop. "Oops," she said, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. My hand slipped. Julian did not look away. He watched me writhe in pain, his face impassive. "Consider this a preview, Brianna," he said over my screams. "We are going to go upstairs and have dinner. We will leave the papers here. When we come back tomorrow, I expect them to be signed. If not, Chloe might have another accident." He turned and walked toward the stairs, not looking back. Chloe dropped the empty wine glass next to my head. It shattered, sending shards of crystal skittering across the floor. "Don't worry, honey," she whispered. "It was a cheap blend anyway. Not worth saving." They walked up the stairs, the sound of their footsteps fading. The heavy door slammed shut. The lock clicked. Darkness swallowed me once again. I lay there gasping for breath, tears streaming down my face, mixing with the dust on the floor. My leg felt like it was on burning coals. The smell of the wine was overpowering now, cloying and sweet like rotting fruit. I lay still for a long time, waiting for my heart rate to slow, waiting for the shock to subside. They thought I was broken. They thought that pain would make me compliant. They thought that by stripping me of my dignity and treating me like an animal, they had won. But as the adrenaline began to fade, a different feeling took its place. It was cold. It was hard. It was the feeling of a switch being flipped deep inside my soul. I stopped crying. I wiped my face with my dirty sleeve. I carefully shifted my weight, gritting my teeth against the pain until I was propped up against the wine rack. Julian had made a fatal miscalculation. He thought he had married a soft suburban girl who organized archives for a living. He forgot where I came from. He forgot that before I wore silk and drank vintage wine, I wore hoodies and carried secrets for the most dangerous men in the city. I reached into my shirt, my hand trembling not from fear, but from rage. I felt the cold plastic against my skin. The underwire of my bra had been digging into me for 2 days, but it had concealed the one thing Julian did not know existed. I pulled it out. A small black burner phone. It was old, scratched, and looked like a toy compared to the smartphones we use today. But it had a battery life that lasted for weeks. I had kept it for 7 years, charged and hidden in the back of my underwear drawer, transferring it to my person whenever I felt unsafe. It was my lifeline to a life I had left behind. a life Julian thought was beneath him. I pressed the power button. The small screen flickered to life, casting a ghostly green glow on my face. 1 bar of signal. It was enough. I did not need to look up the number. It was burned into my memory like a scar. I punched in the digits, my fingers moving with muscle memory. It rang once, twice, then a voice answered. It was deep, rough, and sounded like gravel grinding together. "Who is this?" I took a breath, the air rattling in my dry chest. "It is me, Dante." There was a silence on the other end, a heavy, pregnant silence. Then the voice changed. It lost its edge and became sharp alert. "Bree, where are you? I have been calling your main line for 3 days. Julian said you were on a retreat." I let out a short, bitter laugh. "A retreat," I whispered. "Yeah, you could call it that. Listen to me, Dante. I do not have much time. I am in the cellar of the Hamptons' house. My leg is broken. Julian did it." I heard a sound on the other end like a chair being knocked over. "I am on my way," the voice growled. "I will kill him." "No," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Not yet. If you come in guns blazing, he will call the cops. He will spin it. He has lawyers, Dante. He has the system. We need to do this the right way, the old way." I could hear him breathing heavily, trying to control his rage. "What do you need, Bree?" I looked at the shattered wine glass on the floor. I looked at the divorce papers lying in the dust. I thought about the wine stinging my open wound. I thought about the way Chloe laughed. "Bring the boys," I said, my voice turning into ice. "Bring the cleaning crew. And Dante, bring the ledger." "The ledger." He paused. "You want to ruin him." "I want to erase him," I said. "I want him to sign over everything. I want him to feel what it is like to be helpless. I want to take his company, his house, his reputation, and his freedom. And when I am done, I want him to thank me for letting him live." Dante let out a low, dark chuckle. It was a sound that promised violence. "That is my girl," he said. "Sit tight, little sister. I am bringing the storm." I ended the call and slipped the phone back into its hiding place. I leaned my head back against the wine rack and stared into the darkness. The pain in my leg was still there, but it didn't matter anymore. It was fuel. I closed my eyes and waited. Let them enjoy their dinner upstairs. Let them drink their wine and laugh about their victory, because the clock was ticking. And when the brothers from Onyx Security rolled up that driveway, Julian would realize that he didn't just break his wife's leg. He broke the seal on his own destruction. 2 floors above my concrete prison, a celebration was underway. I could hear the faint, rhythmic thumping of bass from the stereo system and the occasional shuffle of footsteps on the hardwood floors. Julian and Brad were toasting to their success. They were clinking crystal glasses filled with aged scotch, congratulating each other on the merger, and likely laughing about the problem in the cellar. They thought they had won. They thought the world was exactly as they had designed it, a place where men like them took what they wanted, and women like me stayed silent. They had no idea that the ground beneath their feet was about to shift. The first sign that their reality was breaking wasn't a knock on the door. It was a sound that vibrated through the very foundation of the house. A massive metallic screech of tearing steel, followed by a thunderous crash that shook dust loose from the cellar ceiling. The music upstairs cut off instantly. The laughter died. For a second there was total silence. Then came the sound of panic. I lay in the dark, clutching my burner phone, and allowed myself a small, grim smile. My brother had arrived. From what I learned later, the scene outside was something out of a nightmare for a man like Julian. He had expected a few angry relatives in a beat-up sedan, maybe a cousin shouting from the street. Instead, he got a war zone. The heavy wrought iron gates of the estate, which Julian claimed were impenetrable, had been ripped from their hinges by a reinforced bumper. A convoy of 6 matte black SUVs rolled up the long gravel driveway. They did not use sirens. They did not honk. They moved with the terrifying silent precision of a funeral procession. These were not streetcars. They were armored tactical vehicles with tinted windows and run-flat tires, the kind of vehicles used to transport diplomats through war zones. Julian stormed out onto the front porch, his face flushed with alcohol and indignation. He was holding his scotch glass in one hand and pointing an accusing finger with the other. "Who the hell do you think you are?" he shouted, his voice echoing in the sudden quiet of the night. "Get these cars off my property immediately, or I will have you all arrested for trespassing." He turned to Brad, who had followed him out looking pale. "Call the police, Brad. Tell them we have a gang of thugs trying to rob us. Tell them to bring the SWAT team." But Brad did not reach for his phone. He stood frozen on the top step, his eyes wide fixed on the lead vehicle. He was pale, not the flush of anger, but the draining white of pure terror. He grabbed Julian's arm, his grip tight enough to wrinkle the expensive suit jacket. "Shut up, Julian," he hissed. "Put your hand down." Julian shook him off. "What is wrong with you? Look at them. It is just her trashy family trying to scare us." "No, Julian." "Look at the door," Brad whispered, his voice trembling. "Look at the logo on the door." Julian squinted. Stenciled on the side of the lead SUV in dark gray subtle lettering was a shield with a black panther. Underneath it was a single word: Onyx. It took a second for the name to register in Julian's alcohol-addled brain. Onyx Security, the largest private military contractor on the East Coast. They didn't handle mall security. They handled government contracts, high-risk asset extraction, and executive protection for billionaires. They were the people you called when the police couldn't help you, and they were the people you prayed never came for you. The driver's side door of the lead SUV opened. A man stepped out. He was 6 feet 4 inches tall, wearing a bespoke Italian suit that cost more than Julian's car. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine. He didn't look like a thug. He looked like a king. It was Dante, my brother. He didn't shout. He didn't run. He adjusted his cufflinks and walked toward the porch steps with a calm, terrifying grace. Behind him, 12 men exited the other vehicles. They were dressed in tactical black gear, not holding weapons, but their stance made it clear they didn't need guns to end a life. They formed a perimeter around the house, their faces impassive behind dark sunglasses even at night. Julian's bravado faltered. "Who is in charge here?" he stammered, trying to regain his composure. "I am the owner of this house." Dante stopped at the bottom of the stairs. He looked up at Julian, not with anger, but with the kind of boredom a lion feels before swatting a fly. "You are the owner of a mortgage," Dante said, his voice deep and smooth, carrying clearly in the night air. "And you are the owner of a very big mistake. Where is she?" Julian swallowed hard. "I do not know who you are looking for, but you are trespassing. My wife is resting. She is not to be disturbed." Dante didn't even blink. He turned to the man closest to him, a giant with a scar running down his cheek. "Locate her. If any door is locked, kick it down. If anyone stands in your way, remove them." The men moved instantly, flowing past Julian and Brad like water around a stone. Julian tried to step in front of the door. "You cannot go in there," he shouted. "This is private property." Dante took one step up. Just one. But the menace radiating off him was enough to make Julian stumble back. "You broke her leg," Dante said softly. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. Julian's eyes darted around looking for an escape. It was an accident. She fell. She is mentally unstable. We were protecting her. Dante reached out and adjusted Julian's tie. His movements were gentle, but Julian stood paralyzed, terrified that the hand would snap his neck. "If I find a single new bruise on her," Dante whispered, "I will disassemble you, piece by piece." Inside the house, chaos erupted. I heard the front door burst open. I heard the guests screaming as men in black tactical gear flooded the hallway. I heard Chloe shrieking, demanding to know who let these people in. And then I heard footsteps. Not the tentative steps of someone searching, but the heavy, purposeful strides of men who knew exactly where they were going. Down in the cellar, I dragged myself to the center of the room. I wanted to be ready. I wanted them to see me. I wanted them to witness exactly what had been done to me. The footsteps stopped outside the heavy oak door. There was no hesitation, no trying the handle, just a voice. Clear. Prepare for entry. Boom! The door didn't just open. It exploded, inward splinters of wood flying across the room as the lock mechanism was pulverized by a battering ram. Light flooded my prison, real light, not the dim bulb of the cellar, but the beams of tactical flashlights cutting through the dust. Clear a voice shouted, "Subject located, secure the room." 2 men rushed in, scanning the corners for threats. Then Dante walked in. He stopped in the doorway. The sophisticated businessman facade dropped for a fraction of a second, and I saw the brother who used to hold my hand when we walked to school. I saw the pain flash across his eyes, raw and unguarded, as he took in the sight of me. He saw the dirt on my face, the torn silk pants, the swollen purple distortion of my leg, and the dried wine stain on the bandage. He crossed the room in 2 strides and dropped to his knees on the dirty concrete. He didn't care about his suit. He didn't care about the dust. "Bree?" He breathed, his voice cracking. He reached out, hovering his hands over me, afraid to touch me, afraid to cause more pain. I looked up at him through swollen eyes. "You took your time," I whispered, trying to smile, but a sob choked it off. "I am here now," Dante said. His hands were trembling slightly as he touched my face, wiping away a streak of dirt. He looked at my leg, and his jaw tightened until I thought his teeth would shatter. He turned his head, looking back at the man in the doorway. "Get the medic. Now. And bring the stretcher. Do not make her walk." He turned back to me, unbuttoning his suit jacket and draping it over my shivering shoulders. It smelled like expensive cologne and safety. I buried my face in the fabric and finally let myself cry. I cried for the pain. I cried for the betrayal. I cried because for 3 days I had been strong and now I didn't have to be. They lifted me onto the stretcher with gentle, professional hands. The medic, a woman with kind eyes, started an IV line, immediately flushing my system with pain relief. As they carried me out of the cellar, I felt like I was floating. We moved through the kitchen past the island where I had cooked 1,000 meals. We moved into the foyer. The scene in the living room was frozen. The guests were lined up against the wall, silent and terrified. Chloe was sitting on the sofa, pale as a ghost, clutching her pearls. Brad was staring at the floor. And Julian stood in the center of the room, stripped of all his power. When he saw me on the stretcher, he took a step forward. "Brianna," he said, his voice pitching up in a desperate attempt to regain control. "Baby, tell them. Tell them you fell. Tell them I was taking care of you." The procession stopped. Dante signaled for the men to pause. He walked over to Julian. He stood so close that their noses almost touched. Julian was shaking. "You locked her in a basement," Dante said, his voice devoid of all humanity. "Like a dog." "We were waiting for the doctor," Julian stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. Dante turned to me. "Bree," the word hung in the air. He looked at Julian, then back at me. "Say the word, one word, and this house burns down tonight, with him inside it." The room went deathly silent. Everyone knew he wasn't joking. Brad squeezed his eyes shut. Chloe whimpered. Julian looked at me, his eyes pleading not for forgiveness but for his life. He was pathetic. He was small. And suddenly he wasn't scary anymore. I looked at my husband. I looked at the man who had promised to love and cherish me. I felt the pain in my leg dulling as the medicine took effect, but the clarity in my mind remained sharp. If I let Dante hurt him now, Julian would be the victim. He would sue. He would spin the story. He would say my gangster brother attacked him. He would win the narrative. "No," I whispered, my voice raspy but firm. Dante looked at me surprised. "Bree, look what he did to you. I know I said." I struggled to sit up slightly on the stretcher, fixing my eyes on Julian. "I want him to live, Dante." Julian let out a breath of relief. He actually smiled, a weak, tremulous smile, thinking I had saved him because I still loved him. "I want him to live," I continued, my voice gaining strength so he can watch. Watch what Julian asked, confused. Watch me take it all, I said. Every dollar, every brick of this house, every share of your company. I want you to live long enough to see me sleeping in your bed while you sleep in a cell. I want you to be alive when the world finds out who you really are. I looked at Dante. Don't burn it down, Dante. Not yet. We need the assets. Dante stared at me for a long moment. Then a slow, dark grin spread across his face. He nodded. He understood. This wasn't mercy. It was a sentence. He turned back to Julian. You heard her. You get to live. For now. But pray that the police get here before I change my mind. Because the only thing keeping your heart beating is my sister's patience. Dante turned and walked back to the stretcher, placing a protective hand on my shoulder. Move out, he ordered. As we exited the house into the cool night air, I didn't look back. I heard Julian collapsing onto the floor behind us. I heard Chloe sobbing, but all I focused on was the Onyx Panther on the side of the truck. I was broken. I was in pain. But as they loaded me into the back of the SUV, I knew one thing for certain. The victim had died in that cellar. The woman who came out was the predator, and the hunt had just begun. I woke up to the soft, rhythmic beeping of a heart monitor. The air did not smell like a hospital. It smelled like lavender and expensive filtered air. I opened my eyes and saw a ceiling painted with a calming mural of clouds, not the harsh white tiles of a trauma ward. I tried to sit up, but a firm hand gently pushed me back down. I turned my head. Dante was sitting in a leather armchair next to the bed. He had discarded his ruined suit jacket and rolled up the sleeves of his white dress shirt. He looked tired. He looked dangerous. And for the first time in 10 years, he looked scared. You are safe, Bree, he said, his voice low and rough. You are in the private wing of the Onyx Medical Center. No one gets in here unless I say so. I looked around the room. It was bigger than the entire apartment I shared with Julian. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city skyline glittering in the night. This was Dante's world, a world of power, money, and absolute control. A world I had run away from when I was 18 because I wanted to be normal. I wanted to be Brianna the archivist, not Brianna the little sister of the city's biggest underground broker. I looked down at my leg. It was elevated, encased in a lightweight fiberglass cast. The pain was a dull throb, distant and manageable, thanks to whatever was dripping into my veins. I shifted my weight and looked at my brother. You should go home, Dante, I said. You have a business to run. Dante laughed a dry, humorless sound. My business is protecting my assets, and you are my most valuable asset. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city. I never should have let you leave, Bree. I should have kept you close. I should have vetted that piece of trash husband of yours better. I shook my head. No, Dante. I wanted to leave. I wanted a life that didn't involve bodyguards and armored cars. I wanted to earn my own money. I wanted to fall in love with a man who didn't carry a gun. I thought Julian was that man. I thought he was safe. Safe. Dante spat the word out like poison. He broke your leg. He locked you in a cellar. If I had my way, he would be in a barrel of acid right now. I have guys ready to go, Bree. Just say the word. I closed my eyes. I knew he meant it. That was the problem. If Dante killed Julian, the police would investigate. The media would dig. They would find the connection between my quiet life and Dante's empire. I would lose everything I had built, my career, my reputation, and Julian would die a victim, a martyr. No killing, I said firmly. I opened my eyes and stared at the ceiling. Killing him is too easy. It is over in a second. He doesn't learn anything. He doesn't suffer. Dante turned around, leaning against the windowsill. So what is the play? You want to sue him? We can bury him in legal fees for the next 20 years. I smiled, a cold, sharp smile that felt foreign on my face. No lawsuits yet. If we arrest him now, he posts bail. He hires a crisis management team. He plays the grieving, misunderstood husband. He hides his assets. I sat up, ignoring the twinge in my leg. I want to bankrupt him, Dante. I want to strip him naked in front of the whole world. I want him to lose his company. I want him to lose his reputation. I want him to lose his freedom. And I want him to know it was me. Dante looked intrigued. He walked back to the bed. How? The man is slippery. He cooks his books better than a Michelin chef. I tapped the side of my head. Because he forgot what I do for a living, Dante. He thinks I am just a dusty librarian who files papers. He forgot that an archivist's job is to see things, to remember details, to find what people are trying to hide. I took a deep breath. While I was in that cellar, I didn't just lie there. I looked around. Julian is arrogant. He thinks he is smarter than everyone else. He turned the wine cellar into his personal vault because he thought I never went down there. He thought I was too clumsy, too uninterested in his expensive hobbies. I looked Dante in the eye. Behind the row of vintage Bordeaux on the north wall, fourth shelf from the bottom, there is a loose stone. It is not a real stone. It is a keypad safe disguised as masonry. Dante raised an eyebrow. And you know the code? I nodded. It is his birthday backwards, followed by Chloe's birthday, 1982-05. He is that predictable. Dante pulled a chair closer, leaning in. What is in the safe, Bree? I leaned back against the pillows. Everything. I saw him open it once 3 months ago when he thought I was asleep. He took out a black leather ledger. He didn't put it back immediately. He left it on the tasting table while he took a call. I walked down there to get a bottle of water. I saw it open. My mind flashed back to that moment. The rows of numbers, the names, the offshore accounts. My archivist brain had snapped a picture of those pages, storing them away, not knowing why until now. It is a double set of books, Dante, I said. He is laundering money. He is taking investment capital from his tech startup and funneling it into shell companies in the Cayman Islands. He is dodging the IRS. He is defrauding his investors, including Brad's family trust. And he is using the house, my house, as collateral for loans he never intends to pay back. Dante let out a low whistle. That is federal prison time. That is 20 years minimum. Exactly, I said. But we need the physical book. If we just tip off the FBI, he will destroy it before they get a warrant. We need to steal it. We need to secure it. And then we need to wait for the perfect moment to drop it on the table. Dante pulled out his phone. My team is still securing the house. I will have them extract the ledger tonight. No, I said quickly. Do not take it yet. If it goes missing, he will know. He will panic and run. We need him to feel safe. We need him to think he got away with it. We need him to think I am just a broken woman who is going to sign a divorce settlement to make the pain go away. I looked at my brother. I need you to get a copy. Send a pro. Someone who can pick the lock, photograph every page, and put it back exactly how they found it. Julian needs to walk into that shareholder meeting next week thinking he is the king of the world. Dante smiled. A genuine proud smile. You are vicious. I love it. I learned from the best, I said. But there is one more thing. I need access to his transaction history. The real one. Dante tapped his phone screen. Already done. My cyber team cracked his firewall an hour ago. We are mirroring his phone and his laptop. Every text he sends to that mistress, every dollar he moves, we see it. Good, I said. Then we wait. We wait for him to make his big move. He is trying to secure a new round of funding from the Nakamura Group, right? Dante nodded. The deal closes on Friday. $10 million. I settled back into the pillows, my eyes fixing on the city lights. He is going to use that money to pay off the debts he hid in the ledger. We are going to let him sign the deal. We are going to let him think he is safe. And then we are going to show the investors where their money is really going. Dante stood up and kissed my forehead. Get some rest, Bree. You have a war to fight. As he walked out of the room, I looked at the reflection of myself in the darkened window. I didn't look like a victim anymore. I looked like a hunter. Julian had broken my leg, but he had sharpened my mind. He wanted a trophy wife. He was about to find out that trophies are heavy, and if you drop them, they can crush you. The archivist was gone. The sister of Onyx was back, and she was coming for everything. While I lay in the hospital bed watching the swelling in my leg go down, Julian was busy painting a masterpiece. It was a masterpiece of lies. He did not wait for the ink to dry on the police report he never filed. He went straight to the court of public opinion. My brother showed me the text messages from our mutual friends. They were filled with concern, not for me, but for Julian. I heard Brianna is back on the pills, one read. Julian is so brave for standing by her through another relapse. Another one from a neighbor said I saw the ambulance. Julian told us she tried to jump off the balcony. He is a saint for dealing with her mental breaks. I read them all. I did not cry. I did not throw the phone. I let the anger settle into my bones like calcium hardening the fractures Julian had left behind. He was smart. By painting me as an addict and an unstable woman, he was insulating himself. If I spoke up now, I would just be the crazy wife making accusations. If I sued him, it would be dismissed as a delusion. He was building a narrative where he was the long-suffering husband and I was the tragedy he was trying to manage. He was using my silence to bury me. But he forgot one thing. The dead do not stay buried when they have unfinished business, and I was very much alive. 3 days after the rescue, I checked myself out of the medical center. Dante was furious. He wanted me to stay for a week. He wanted to wrap me in cotton wool. But I told him that war does not wait for physical therapy. I had a wheelchair. I had a pair of oversized Celine sunglasses to hide the dark circles under my eyes. And most importantly, I had Mr. Sterling. Elijah Sterling was not a divorce attorney. He was a corporate shark who specialized in hostile takeovers and asset forfeiture. He was the kind of lawyer Dante kept on a monthly retainer that cost more than most people earn in a year. He did not wear off the rack suits. He wore bespoke three-piece armor and carried a briefcase that looked like it contained nuclear codes. When Dante wheeled me out to the waiting SUV, Sterling was already in the back seat reviewing a file. He looked at my cast, then at my face. "Mrs. Reynolds," he said, his voice smooth as velvet, "I have reviewed the marital assets. Your husband has been very busy moving money. I hope you are ready to stop him." I climbed into the car, wincing as I settled my leg. "I am not just ready, Mr. Sterling. I am impatient." We did not go to the police station. We went to the First National Bank on Fifth Avenue. This was where Julian kept our primary joint accounts. It was where the operating capital for his lifestyle lived. It was a building of marble and gold, designed to make you feel small. But as Dante pushed my wheelchair through the revolving doors, flanked by two of his largest security guards, I did not feel small. I felt like a demolition crew. The bank manager, a man named Mr. Henderson, hurried over when he saw us. He knew Julian well. Julian made sure everyone knew him. Mr. Henderson looked at my wheelchair, then at the stone-faced guards, then at Mr. Sterling. He looked nervous. "Mrs. Reynolds," he stammered, wiping his palms on his trousers. We didn't expect you. Julian, Mr. Reynolds said you were indisposed, that you were at a treatment facility." I lowered my sunglasses just enough for him to see the cold clarity in my eyes. "My husband is mistaken, Mr. Henderson. As you can see, I am quite lucid, and I am here to discuss the joint accounts." Mr. Henderson swallowed hard. "Of course. Please come to my office." We sat in his plush office, the air conditioning humming a low note of tension. Mr. Sterling did not waste time with pleasantries. He placed a single document on the mahogany desk. It was not a court order. It was a notification of dispute. According to the bank's bylaws regarding joint tenancy, Mr. Sterling began, his voice bored but dangerous. Any party named on the account has the right to freeze all outgoing assets if there is a suspicion of fraudulent activity or marital dispute. Mr. Henderson looked at the paper, then at me. "Mrs. Reynolds, surely this isn't necessary. Mr. Reynolds uses these accounts for daily business, the mortgage, the car payments, his entertainment expenses. If we freeze them, checks will bounce." I leaned forward in my wheelchair. "That is the point, Mr. Henderson." "But he is a preferred client," the manager protested. "He is a husband who is dissipating marital assets," I cut in. "And since I have not signed any divorce papers, half of every dollar in that vault belongs to me. If you allow him to withdraw one more cent while this dispute is active, I will sue this bank for negligence, and Mr. Sterling will be leading the charge." Mr. Henderson looked at Sterling, who simply smiled a smile that showed too many teeth. The manager typed something into his computer. His hand was shaking. "Very well, Mrs. Reynolds. I am placing a temporary hold on the checking, savings, and the primary credit line. No transactions will be authorized without dual signature." I watched him hit the enter key. It was a small motion, a tap of a finger, but it felt like dropping a guillotine. "Thank you," I said, putting my sunglasses back on. "Have a nice day." As we left the bank, I checked the time. It was 7:30 in the evening. I knew exactly where Julian was. I had seen the calendar invite on his mirrored phone. He was at Le Bernardin, one of the most expensive seafood restaurants in the city. He was having dinner with Brad and 3 potential investors from the Nakamura Group. He was about to close the deal that would save his company. He was probably ordering the tasting menu. He was probably laughing. I turned to Dante. "Take me home. I want to be there when he calls." Across town, the scene was playing out exactly as I imagined. I know this because Dante's team had tapped the restaurant's security feed. I watched it later on a tablet, enjoying every frame. Julian was sitting at the head of the table looking radiant. He was wearing his lucky navy suit. Brad was next to him, laughing loudly at a joke one of the investors made. The table was covered in empty wine bottles and plates of half-eaten, delicate seafood. The bill arrived on a small silver tray. Julian snatched it up before anyone else could reach for it. "No, gentlemen," he announced, his voice booming with false generosity. "This is on me. A celebration of our future partnership." The investors smiled, nodding appreciatively. Julian pulled out his wallet. He bypassed the corporate card, which was maxed out, and pulled out the black Amex. The heavy metal card, the one linked to our joint investment account, the one he used to buy Chloe's jewelry. He placed it on the tray with a flourish. The waiter took it and walked away. Julian leaned back, sipping his espresso, looking like a man who owned the world. He started talking about his vision for the tech startup, how the capital injection would double their returns in 6 months. He was charismatic. He was convincing. Then the waiter returned. He did not walk with the brisk efficiency of a transaction completed. He walked slowly. He leaned down to Julian's ear, whispering discreetly. Julian's smile faltered for a second. He waved his hand dismissively. "Try it again," he said loud enough for the table to hear. "The chip is probably dirty." The waiter looked uncomfortable. "Sir, we tried it 3 times. The system says the issuer has declined the charge." The table went quiet. Brad stopped laughing. The investors exchanged glances. Julian laughed nervously. "That is ridiculous. It is a black card. There is no limit. Here." He pulled out another card. "A platinum Visa. Try this one." The waiter took it and walked back to the terminal station near the wall. Julian turned back to the investors. "Banks," he joked, "always flagging the big transactions for fraud protection. It is for our safety, right?" They chuckled politely, but the air in the room had changed. It was awkward now. 5 minutes passed. The waiter came back. He looked even more apologetic this time. "Sir, this one was also declined. The code says, refer to issuer. Account frozen." Julian stood up his chair, scraping loudly against the floor. "That is impossible." He pulled out his phone, dialing the bank's VIP line. I watched on the video feed as his face went from red to a ghostly white. He was listening to the automated message. "Your account has been suspended pending a joint holder dispute. Please contact your local branch during business hours. Joint holder. Me." He looked at the phone in horror. He realized then that I wasn't just crying in a hospital bed. He realized I was in his wallet. "Is there a problem, Julian?" Brad asked, his voice sharp. Julian looked at Brad, then at the investors. Just a technical glitch. My wife. She must have messed up the online banking passwords. I need to sort this out." He patted his pockets, pretending to look for another card, but he knew they were all linked. He was liquidating assets, but he hadn't moved the cash to his safe yet. He was cash poor and asset rich, and I had just locked the vault. Brad sighed a heavy, disappointed sound. He pulled out his own card and threw it on the tray. "I will get it," he snapped. "We can't keep these gentlemen waiting all night while you figure out your domestic issues." The investors looked at Julian with new eyes. They didn't see a tech mogul anymore. They saw a man who couldn't pay for dinner. They saw a man whose wife was freezing his accounts. And in the world of high finance, instability at home means instability in the boardroom. One of the investors, Mr. Nakamura, stood up, buttoning his jacket. "Perhaps we should reschedule the signing meeting, Julian. It seems you have some personal matters to attend to. We prefer our partners to be settled." Julian tried to protest. "No, please, this is just a misunderstanding. I will have it fixed by morning." "We will call you," Mr. Nakamura said, cold and distant. They walked out, leaving Julian standing there with Brad. As soon as they were gone, Brad turned on him. "You idiot! You told me you had her under control. You told me she was a vegetable." Julian looked at his phone, his thumb hovering over my name. "She is," he whispered. "She has to be." But he knew. Deep down in his gut, he knew. He dialed my number. I was sitting in my brother's penthouse overlooking the city lights when my phone buzzed. Julian's face appeared on the screen. I let it ring. 1, 2, 3. Then I answered. "Hello, Julian," I said, my voice calm and bright. "How is the sea bass?" "Brianna," he hissed, his voice shaking with rage. "What did you do? My cards are dead. You humiliated me." I took a sip of water. "Oh, I am sorry. I just thought since I am a drug addict and mentally unstable, I shouldn't be trusted with access to so much money. I was just protecting us, Julian. Isn't that what you wanted? To protect me?" "Undo it," he screamed. "Undo it right now or I swear to God." "You will do what?" I interrupted, my voice dropping an octave. "You will break my other leg. You will lock me in another cellar. Go ahead, Julian. Come over here and try, but bring an army. Because my brother is home and he is dying for a reason to practice his target shooting." There was silence on the line, heavy breathing. "I am not undoing anything," I said. "And Julian, this is just the appetizer. You might want to save your energy. You are going to need it when you see what I serve for the main course." I hung up the phone. I looked at Dante, who was grinning from the kitchen. I felt a surge of adrenaline that was better than any painkiller. I had taken his money. I had taken his pride, and tomorrow I was going to take his future. The war was on, and I had just fired the first cannon. The Vanderwall Annual Charity Gala is the kind of event where the flowers alone cost more than the average American mortgage. It is held in the grand ballroom of the Pierre Hotel, a space of gilded mirrors, crystal chandeliers, and old money that smells like lavender and judgment. To get into this room, you do not just need money. You need lineage. You need a last name that is carved into the foundations of libraries and hospitals. My husband Julian had none of those things. He was new money, loud, desperate tech money. But he had Brad, his brother-in-law. Brad was a Vanderwall. And tonight Brad was Julian's golden ticket back into society. I was not at the Pierre Hotel. I was sitting in the media room of my brother's penthouse, my injured leg propped up on a velvet ottoman. On the massive screen in front of me was a live high-definition feed of the ballroom. Dante's team had not just hacked the security cameras. They had compromised the entire audio-visual system of the hotel. I could see everything. I could see the waiters circulating with trays of champagne. I could see the women in their couture gowns eyeing each other with polite disdain. And then I saw them. Julian walked in like he owned the place. He was wearing a tuxedo that was cut too slim, trying too hard to look European. On his arm was Chloe. She was wearing a red dress. It was a beautiful dress on a runway, but in a room full of understated pastels and diamonds, she looked like a flare gun in a library. She was clinging to Julian, beaming at the cameras, completely unaware that half the room was whispering about who she was and where Julian's wife was. I watched Julian work the room. He was sweating. I could see the sheen of moisture on his forehead, even through the camera feed. He was desperate. After the credit card humiliation at the restaurant, he needed to secure the Nakamura funding tonight. He needed to prove that he was stable, that he was liquid, and that the incident with the cards was just a glitch. I watched him corner Mr. Nakamura near the ice sculpture. Mr. Nakamura looked polite but distant. He was a man of tradition. He did not like scandals. I turned up the volume on the feed, Dante's audio tech isolating their conversation. Mr. Nakamura Julian said, his voice pitched slightly too high, "I am so glad I caught you. I wanted to apologize again for the confusion at dinner. My bank has assured me it was a system-wide error. Fraud protection algorithms are getting too sensitive these days with all the AI threats." Mr. Nakamura sipped his sparkling water. "It was unfortunate, Julian, but my board is concerned. Stability is key for us. And I notice your wife is not here tonight. Is she still unwell?" Julian put on his sad face, the face he practiced in the mirror. "She is struggling. It is heartbreaking, really. But we are getting her the best care. Chloe here has been a rock, helping me manage the estate while Brianna recovers." He gestured to Chloe, who smiled a vacuous, rehearsed smile. I gripped the armrest of my chair. He was using his mistress to comfort the investors about his wife. The audacity was breathtaking. Brad appeared beside them, clapping a hand on Julian's shoulder. He looked tense. His mother, Mrs. Vanderwall was the hostess of the evening, and he was terrified Julian would embarrass the family. "Let's take our seats, gentlemen," Brad said. "Mother is about to start the presentation. The foundation has a lovely video tribute prepared for the donors. They moved to table 1, the prime table, right in front of the stage." Julian pulled out a chair for Chloe, and she sat down, fluffing her dress, taking up too much space. Julian sat next to Mr. Nakamura, pouring him more wine, laughing too loudly at a joke that wasn't funny. He looked at the stage, waiting for his moment. He had donated $50,000 of our money to this charity last month just to get a shout-out in the speech. He needed that public validation. He needed the room to clap for him. Mrs. Vanderwall took the podium. She was a woman of 70, with hair like steel wool and pearls the size of grapes. She tapped the microphone. "Good evening, distinguished guests. Tonight we celebrate compassion. We celebrate those who give back. We celebrate integrity." Julian straightened his tie, preening. He was ready for his name to be called. And now Mrs. Vanderwall continued, "Please turn your attention to the screen for a tribute to our platinum donors." The lights in the ballroom dimmed. The massive projection screen behind the stage flickered to life. Soft piano music began to play. Images of smiling children and new hospital wings faded in and out. Julian leaned back, sipping his champagne, looking satisfied. Then the screen glitched. It wasn't a subtle glitch. It was a violent tear in the digital image. The smiling children vanished. The screen went black for a heartbeat. The piano music cut out with a screech that made several guests cover their ears. In the penthouse, Dante leaned forward from the sofa behind me. "Here we go," he whispered. On the screen in the ballroom, the Onyx Panther logo did not appear. We were subtler than that. Instead, a waveform appeared. A simple white audio line on a black background. And then the sound began. It started with a laugh. It was Chloe's laugh. High-pitched, cruel, echoing through the silent ballroom speakers. Oops, my hand slipped. The room froze. 1,000 forks stopped halfway to 1,000 mouths. The clarity of the audio was terrifying. It sounded like she was standing at the podium. Then came the sound of liquid splashing, the sound of a woman screaming. My scream. It was raw and guttural, the sound of an animal in a trap. Julian dropped his champagne glass. It shattered on the table, but no one noticed the noise because the audio continued. "Pour the wine on it." Julian's voice boomed through the hall. Distinct, unmistakable. Disinfect it. She needs to learn. In the ballroom, heads turned, hundreds of them. They turned from the screen to table 1, to Julian, to Chloe. But the audio wasn't done. The waveform spiked again. "You think I care about the Nakamura deal?" Julian's voice sneered. It was the recording I had taken weeks ago when he was drunk in his study ranting to Brad. I watched Mr. Nakamura stiffen in his chair. He slowly put down his napkin. "That old man is a dinosaur," Julian's voice continued, echoing off the gold leaf ceiling. "He is a senile old pig. I will take his 10 million smile at his stupid bow and then gut his company from the inside. He doesn't understand tech. He barely understands English. He is just a wallet waiting to be picked." The silence in the ballroom was absolute. It was a vacuum, a black hole of shock. Mr. Nakamura did not shout. He did not make a scene. He simply stood up. He smoothed his jacket. He looked down at Julian, who was frozen in his chair, his face a mask of pale horror. Mr. Nakamura looked at Julian with a disgust so profound it felt physical. Then he turned and walked away. His entire board of directors followed him like a phalanx. Julian finally snapped out of his paralysis. He jumped up, knocking his chair over. "No, wait," he shouted. "Stop the video! Cut the feed!" He ran toward the stage, waving his arms frantically. Brad was already there, grabbing his mother's arm, trying to pull her away from the podium. Mrs. Vanderwall looked like she was about to faint. She looked at Julian like he was a cockroach that had crawled out of the salad. Julian grabbed the microphone. The feedback squealed. "Please listen!" he screamed, his voice cracking. "This is not real. This is a fake. It is AI." He pointed at the black screen where the waveform had faded. "I am a tech CEO. I have enemies. This is a deepfake attack." They cloned my voice. They cloned her voice. "I never said those things. I love the Nakamura group. I love my wife." Chloe stood up, trying to rally to his side, but as she did, the red wine from Julian's shattered glass dripped off the table onto her dress. It looked like blood. She looked around the room, realizing that no one was looking at her with envy anymore. They were looking at her with revulsion. "It is a deep fake," Julian yelled again, sweating profusely. "You have to believe me. It is a generated attack." But then the audio played one last clip. It wasn't Julian, and it wasn't Chloe. It was Brad. "You idiot," Brad's voice played. "You told me she was broken. You told me the family would never find out." Brad froze on stage. He looked at Julian. The room gasped. This wasn't just Julian's mess anymore. It was the Vanderwalls' mess. The golden boy, Brad, was complicit. Julian looked at Brad. Brad looked at the exit. "Get him out of here," Brad hissed at the security guards. "Get him out now." Two large security guards stepped onto the stage. They didn't grab the hacker. They grabbed Julian. "I am a victim here," Julian screamed as they dragged him down the steps. "I am being framed. It is a deepfake. It is AI." He was still shouting it as they hauled him through the double doors, past the staring guests, past the silent waiters, past the ruins of his social climbing career. Chloe was left standing alone at the table. She looked at Mrs. Vanderwall. Mrs. Vanderwall signaled to a waiter. The waiter walked over and quietly asked Chloe to leave. She grabbed her purse and ran out, covering her face, trying to hide from the hundreds of cell phones that were now recording her. In the penthouse, I took a sip of my tea. It was chamomile. Soothing. I watched the screen as the ballroom slowly dissolved into chaos. The charity gala was ruined. The Vanderwall name was tarnished. The Nakamura deal was dead, and Julian was branded. He could scream AI all he wanted. But the things he said about Mr. Nakamura were things everyone knew he thought. The truth rings with a specific frequency that lies cannot mimic, and deep down everyone in that room knew they had heard the real Julian. Dante muted the feed. He turned to me with a grin that could cut glass. Phase 1 complete. The reputation is gone. I nodded, setting my cup down. "He is panic-stricken now," I said softly. "He will go to the office. He will try to move the money before the investors pull out completely. He thinks he can still save the company if he has the cash." Dante checked his watch. "The boys are ready." "Good," I said. "Let him run. Let him think he has a lifeboat. It will make it so much sweeter when we sink it." I looked at the black screen one last time, imagining Julian standing on the sidewalk outside the Pierre Hotel, shivering in the cold, realizing that no one was going to call him an Uber. He was alone, and for the first time in his life, his charm couldn't save him. The social execution was over. Now it was time for the financial burial. The morning after the charity gala disaster, Julian's office looked less like the headquarters of a burgeoning tech empire and more like a bunker under siege. I was watching him from the comfort of my brother's guest suite via the pinhole camera Dante's team had installed in the smoke detector 3 months ago. Julian had not gone home, had not gone. He had slept on his leather couch, still wearing his tuxedo trousers and a wrinkled undershirt. His phone, which usually buzzed incessantly with praise and business offers, was terrifyingly silent. The investors had pulled out. The Nakamura deal was dead, and the board of directors had called an emergency meeting for Monday morning to discuss his removal as CEO. He was pacing the length of his office, chewing on his thumbnail, a nervous habit I had tried to break him of for years. He was cornered. He needed $10 million by close of business Friday to cover the massive hole in the company accounts. If he didn't fill that hole, the audit on Monday would reveal that he had been siphoning funds to pay for his lifestyle and for Chloe's apartment. That would be embezzlement. That would be prison. But Julian was a survivor, or at least he thought he was. He believed that he could talk his way out of anything. He believed that money could fix any problem. So when his assistant buzzed in with a miraculous offer, he didn't question it. He didn't ask why a private equity firm he had never heard of was suddenly interested in saving a sinking ship. He just saw a lifeline. "Mr. Silas is here to see you, sir." The assistant's voice crackled over the intercom. "Send him in," Julian barked, smoothing his hair and putting on his suit jacket. He took a deep breath, trying to summon the arrogance that had carried him this far. Mr. Silas walked in. He was a man who looked like he was carved out of granite. He wore a gray suit that cost more than Julian's car and carried a leather briefcase that looked heavy. He was not a real investor. He was an actor, a former corporate litigator who owed Dante a favor and was all too happy to play the role of a shark. Mr. Reynolds Silas said, his voice deep and devoid of warmth, "I represent Aurora Capital. We understand you are in need of a bridge loan." Fast. Julian motioned to the chair. "Please sit. It is not so much a need as a strategic realignment. We had a disagreement with the Nakamura Group regarding vision. We are looking for partners who understand the future of tech." Silas did not sit. He placed the briefcase on the desk and clicked it open. "Cut the sales pitch, Mr. Reynolds. We know you are bleeding. We know the board is circling. We know you need $10 million today or you are finished." Julian flinched. The bluntness hit him like a physical blow. He slumped slightly in his chair, his bravado evaporating. "We are prepared to offer you the full $10 million. Silas continued, pulling out a thick document. "Wire transfer, immediate availability." Julian's eyes lit up with greed and relief. He reached for the document. "What are the terms?" Silas pulled the document back slightly. "The terms are aggressive. We are taking a risk on a CEO with a damaged reputation. Therefore, we require collateral, significant collateral." Julian waved his hand. "Of course, the company assets." "Not the company," Silas interrupted. "The company is currently worthless on paper thanks to your little show at the Pierre Hotel. We want personal collateral. We want a lien on your estate in the Hamptons. We want your personal investment portfolio. We want your luxury vehicles. And most importantly, we want the rights to your intellectual property, the code for the new algorithm." Julian hesitated. The algorithm was his baby. It was the only thing of real value he had created. But he looked at the clock. It was 2 p.m. The banks closed at 5. He had 3 hours to save his life. "Fine," he said, his voice tight. "I own 50% of the Hamptons house. My wife owns the other half. We will take your 50%, Silas said, and we will take a controlling interest in your patent." Julian did not read the contract. Not really. He skimmed the bold headings: interest rates, repayment schedule, disbursement of funds. He was so focused on the money that he missed the trap. He missed the paragraph on page 42, the paragraph I had drafted myself with the help of Dante's legal team. It was a standard clause in high-risk lending, but with a very specific twist. It was called the Criminal Liability Acceleration Clause. In simple terms, it stated that if the borrower became the subject of any criminal investigation, indictment, or felony charge within 30 days of signing the loan, would be considered in default immediately. And the penalty for default wasn't just repayment. It was total asset forfeiture. Julian picked up his fountain pen. The heavy gold Mont Blanc I had given him for his 30th birthday. He looked at Silas. "Once I sign this, the money is wired today." Within the hour, Silas confirmed. Julian signed. He pressed the nib into the paper so hard it almost tore. He signed away his safety net. He signed away his future. He signed his name with a flourish, thinking he had just outsmarted the world again. He thought he was borrowing time. He didn't know he was signing his own death warrant. Silas took the document, checked the signature, and placed it back in his briefcase. He pulled out his phone and sent a text. "Done. The money is moving." Julian let out a breath he had been holding for 24 hours. He slumped back in his chair, laughing a manic, hysterical sound. "Thank you. You won't regret this." Silas looked at him with cold, dead eyes. "I know I won't. Enjoy the money, Mr. Reynolds." As Silas walked out of the office, I watched Julian on the screen. He stood up and did a little victory dance. He punched the air. He poured himself a drink. He picked up his phone and dialed Chloe. "Baby," he shouted into the phone. "We are back. I fixed it. I got the money. Screw the Vanderwalls. Screw Brianna. I am untouchable." I sat in the penthouse sipping my tea and feeling a cold, hard satisfaction. He really thought he had won. He thought the money would hit his account, he would pay back the embezzled funds, and the audit on Monday would come up clean. He thought he had 30 days to turn things around. But he didn't have 30 days. He didn't even have 30 hours. What Julian didn't know was that while he was busy trying to save his reputation, I had been busy with paperwork of my own. 3 days ago, before I even left the hospital, I had sent a package to the Internal Revenue Service Criminal Investigation Division. It wasn't just a tip. It was a roadmap. The package contained the photos I had taken of the black ledger in the wine cellar. It contained the transaction numbers of the offshore accounts. It contained a sworn affidavit from me detailing how he had used company funds for personal expenses and disguised them as business development costs. And most damning of all, it contained a recording of him bragging about dodging taxes. The IRS does not move fast for small fish. But for a high-profile tech CEO involved in a public scandal who is moving $10 million of unexplained capital, they move with terrifying speed. I looked at Dante, who was cleaning a handgun on the coffee table, not because he needed to use it, but because he found the ritual calming. He signed it. I said, my voice soft. Dante looked up and grinned. And the wire. It went through. The money is in his account. He is probably transferring it to the corporate ledger right now to hide his theft. Perfect, Dante said, holstering the weapon. So now he has $10 million of our money mixed in with his dirty money. Exactly, I said. And when the feds freeze his assets tomorrow morning, they are going to freeze our $10 million too. But that doesn't matter, because under the contract terms, the moment he gets arrested, ownership of his assets transfers to Aurora Capital, so we lose the $10 million, but we gain the house, the patent, and everything he owns, Dante summarized. I nodded. It is a steep price, but watching him realize he paid for his own destruction, that is priceless. On the screen, Julian was sitting at his computer, typing furiously. He was moving the money, covering his tracks. He looked relieved. He looked like a man who had just escaped a firing squad. He had no idea that the bullet was already in the air. The next morning came with a gray, heavy sky. It was Friday, the day the Nakamura deal was supposed to close. Instead, it was the day the hammer fell. I was ready. I had traded my wheelchair for a cane. I was wearing a black dress that looked appropriate for a funeral because, in a way, that is what this was. The funeral of Julian Reynolds. We didn't go to his office. We went to the lobby of his building. I wanted to see him walk out in handcuffs. I wanted him to see me standing there. We parked across the street in one of Dante's SUVs with tinted windows. We didn't have to wait long. At 9:15 in the morning, 4 unmarked sedans pulled up to the curb. They didn't look like police cars. They were plain gray Fords. But the men and women who stepped out were wearing windbreakers with 3 yellow letters on the back. IRS. They walked into the building with purpose. They didn't stop at the front desk. They flashed badges and went straight to the elevators. I watched the clock. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. Then the revolving doors started to spin. Julian came out first. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket. His hands were behind his back cuffed. He looked small. He looked confused. He was shouting something at the agents, but they weren't listening. They were guiding him toward the back seat of his sedan. Behind him, agents were carrying boxes, white cardboard boxes filled with files, and one agent was carrying a computer tower, the computer where he had just moved the money. Julian looked wild. He was scanning the street looking for help, looking for a lawyer, looking for a way out. And then his eyes locked on the black SUV across the street. I rolled down the window, just halfway, just enough for him to see my face. I took off my sunglasses. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I just looked at him with absolute indifference. He froze. He stopped fighting the agents. He stared at me, and I saw the realization hit him like a freight train. He knew. In that split second, he connected the dots. The ledger, the bank freeze, the gala, and now this. He started screaming. Not for a lawyer. He was screaming my name. Brianna, you did this, you witch, I will kill you. The agents pushed him into the car. He tried to resist kicking at the door, still screaming. It wasn't the scream of a powerful man. It was the scream of a child who had been caught. One of the agents, a tall woman with a stern face, looked over at my car. She nodded once, acknowledging the tip. Then she got in the car, and they drove away. Dante turned to me from the driver's seat. So that is it. He is gone. Not yet, I said, rolling up the window. He is arrested. Now comes the hard part. The contract kicks in. I pulled out my phone and dialed Mr. Silas. "Make the call," I said. "Mr. Reynolds has been detained by federal agents. He is in violation of Clause 14. B. Execute the forfeiture. Take the house. Take the patent. Take the cars. Leave him with nothing but the suit on his back." I hung up. I leaned back in the seat, feeling a wave of exhaustion wash over me. It was done. The financial strip mining was complete. Julian was going to prison not as a wealthy martyr, but as a broke fraudster. He had no money for bail. He had no money for a dream team defense. He had signed away his defense fund to the very people who put him there. "Let's go get some breakfast," Dante said, starting the engine. "You must be hungry." "I am," I said, looking at the empty spot where the police car had been. "I am starving." But as we drove away, I knew the game wasn't quite over. Julian was desperate, and desperate men are dangerous even behind bars. He still had one card to play. He still had his voice, and he would try to drag me down with him. He would try to paint me as the mastermind. He would try to make this look like a setup. He was right, of course. It was a setup. But he was playing checkers, and I had been playing chess since the day he pushed me down those stairs. We drove toward the city, the skyline looking sharp and bright. I thought about the contract sitting on Silas's desk, the signature at the bottom, Julian Reynolds. It looked so authoritative on paper. Now it was just an autograph from a ghost. The money was gone. The power was gone. All that was left was the truth. And the truth was waiting for him in a cold interrogation room with a federal agent who had my photos on her desk. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in 3 years, I felt completely safe. Not because the danger was gone, but because I finally held the weapon. The apartment where I had lived with Julian for 3 years felt different now. It was no longer a home. It was a crime scene of wasted time. I stood in the center of the living room, leaning heavily on my hickory cane. The movers were already gone, having taken the last of the furniture that I wanted to keep, which was very little. The space was echoing and empty, just like my marriage. I was only there to leave the keys on the counter and walk away forever. But the universe decided I needed one last confrontation to truly close the door. I heard the elevator ding down the hall, followed by the frantic clicking of heels on the parquet floor. The front door was unlocked. I had left it open for the cleaning crew, but the person who burst through the doorway was not there to scrub floors. It was Chloe. She looked like a natural disaster. The polished mistress I had seen at the gala was gone. In her place was a woman unraveling at the seams. Her designer coat was buttoned wrong. Her hair, usually a perfect cascade of waves, was pulled back in a messy knot. And her eyes were red-rimmed, wild, and desperate. She saw me standing by the window and stopped short. Her chest was heaving. "You!" she hissed the word, dripping with venom. "You are still here!" I turned slowly, pivoting on my good leg. My cane tapped rhythmically against the hardwood floor. "Hello, Chloe. I see you got my message about the eviction." She slammed the door behind her, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the empty room. She walked toward me, her hands balled into fists. "You think this is funny. You think you can just ruin people's lives because you are bitter." I looked at her calmly. Ruin lives. That is an interesting choice of words coming from the woman who poured wine on my broken leg. Chloe flinched, but her anger quickly overrode her shame. "Julian is in federal custody," she screamed. "They denied his bail. They froze everything. He cannot even call a lawyer because his accounts are locked. And now I come home and find a notice on my door." She reached into her bag and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper, throwing it at me. It fluttered to the floor, landing near my orthopedic boot. "Eviction," she yelled. 3 days' notice. "Do you know who my father is? You cannot treat me like this." I looked down at the paper, then back at her. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. I had all the leverage. "I am not treating you like anything, Chloe. I am simply conducting business." "Business?" She laughed, a manic, high-pitched sound. "This is not business. This is jealousy. You are jealous because he chose me. You are jealous because I gave him what you couldn't. Passion, excitement, a future." I felt a laugh bubble up in my chest, but I held it back. Passion. Was that what they called it? I looked at this woman who had helped destroy my family, and I realized she was not a monster. She was just a parasite. A parasite that had attached itself to the wrong host and was now starving. He didn't choose you, Chloe, I said, my voice cool and detached. He used you. You were a shiny object. And now that he is in a cage, he cannot play with his toys anymore. Her face twisted in rage. She took a step closer, invading my personal space. The smell of stale alcohol and fear radiated off her. "Shut up," she spat. "You don't know anything. He loves me. We were going to get married as soon as he got rid of you." I adjusted my grip on the cane, feeling the smooth wood under my palm. "Got rid of me? Is that what he said? Did he tell you how he planned to do that? Did he mention the wine cellar? Did he mention the stairs?" Chloe stopped. A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. "He didn't care about you," I continued. "He only cared that you were willing to help him hurt me. You were an accomplice, Chloe, not a partner. And now you are a liability." She shook her head violently. "No, you are lying. You are just a pathetic, crippled ex-wife who is trying to scare me." "Well, I am not scared of you." She looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on my cast. "You can barely stand," she mocked. "You think you are powerful because your brother has goons. But in this room it is just you and me, and you are weak." She made a mistake then. She confused physical injury with weakness. She confused silence with submission. She thought that because I was leaning on a cane, I was helpless. She forgot that I had dragged myself across a cellar floor with a broken bone. She forgot that I had survived 3 days in the dark. I saw the muscles in her shoulder tense before she moved. I saw the intention in her eyes. She wanted to hurt me. She wanted to slap the smirk off my face. She wanted to exert dominance the only way she knew how, physically. She lunged. Her hand was raised, her palm open, aiming for my cheek. In the past, the old Brianna might have flinched. The old Brianna might have cowered and taken the hit, hoping to de-escalate the situation. But that Brianna died the night she fell down the stairs. The woman standing in the living room was forged in fire. I did not step back. I shifted my weight. As her arm came down, I brought the cane up. It wasn't a clumsy swing. It was a precise, calculated block. The hickory wood connected with her forearm with a solid crack. Chloe gasped in pain, stumbling back, her attack deflected. But I wasn't done. Before she could regain her balance, I stepped forward. I planted my cast firmly on the floor, ignoring the dull ache. I swung the bottom of the cane in a low arc. The rubber tip hooked behind her ankle. I pulled. Sharp. Hard. Chloe's feet went out from under her. She flailed her arms, grabbing at the air, but there was nothing to hold on to. She hit the floor hard, landing on her side with a heavy thud. The breath left her lungs in a whoosh. She lay there for a second, stunned. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with shock. She tried to scramble backward, crab walking away from me as if I were a demon. I tapped the cane on the floor once. A judge banging a gavel. "I warned you," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I told you to know your place." Chloe held her arm where I had blocked her strike. You hit me," she stammered. "I will call the police. I will sue you." I laughed then. A real, genuine laugh. "Go ahead, call them. Tell them you broke into my apartment and tried to assault me. Tell them I defended myself. See how that works out for you." I took a step toward her, looming over her prone figure. She shrank back, pressing herself against the baseboard. "Now let's talk about your living situation," I said. "My living—" "What are you talking about?" she whimpered. "The eviction notice," I said, pointing to the crumpled paper with the tip of my cane. "You seem confused. Let me clarify." I leaned down slightly, looking her dead in the eye. "You like that wine cellar, don't you, Chloe? The one where you poured wine on my open wound? The one where you laughed while I screamed?" Her lip trembled. She didn't answer. "Well, I hope you liked it," I said. "Because that wine cellar is mine now. The house in the Hamptons. It belongs to Aurora Capital. And do you know who owns Aurora Capital?" I waited, letting the silence stretch. "My brother owns it, which means I own it." Chloe's face went pale. "And that apartment you are renting in the city?" I continued. "The one with the view of the park. The one Julian was paying for with stolen money." I paused, savoring the moment. "I bought the building this morning, Chloe. I bought the management company. I am your landlord." Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The realization washed over her. She wasn't just fighting an ex-wife, she was fighting the person who owned the roof over her head. I checked my watch. It was a gold Cartier tank watch. A gift to myself. "You have exactly 58 minutes," I said, checking the dial. 58 minutes for what she whispered. "To get your things and get out," I said. "My security team is in the lobby. In 1 hour, they are coming up to change the locks. Anything left inside becomes the property of the landlord. That means me." "But I have nowhere to go," she sobbed. "My clothes, my furniture. I can't move in an hour." "That sounds like a personal problem," I said, straightening up. "Maybe you can stay with your parents. Oh, wait, didn't you tell Julian your father disowned you for dating a married man?" Chloe broke down then. She curled into a ball on the floor, sobbing into her hands. It wasn't a cry of remorse. It was the cry of a spoiled child who had finally been told no. I watched her for a moment, feeling absolutely nothing. No pity. No anger, just a cold sense of completion. She was small, she was insignificant. She was part of a past I was leaving behind. I turned my back on her. I walked to the counter and placed the keys to the apartment on the marble surface. "You have 57 minutes now," I called out over my shoulder. "I suggest you start packing." I walked to the door, my cane tapping a victory march on the floor. I didn't look back at the woman sobbing on the floor. I didn't look back at the empty apartment. I walked out into the hallway and pressed the button for the elevator. When the doors opened, Dante was standing there. He was leaning against the back wall of the elevator, checking his phone. He looked up and saw me. He saw the fire in my eyes. He saw the way I was standing straighter than I had in years. He didn't ask what happened. He just smiled. "Handle it?" he asked. "Handled," I replied, stepping into the elevator. As the doors closed, shutting out the sound of Chloe's weeping, I took a deep breath. The air in the elevator smelled clean. It smelled like freedom. I had faced the woman who tried to break me, and I had brought her to her knees without shedding a single tear. Julian was in a cell. Chloe was on the street. And I was just getting started. "Where to?" Dante asked, pressing the button for the lobby. "Take me to the office," I said. "We have a company to run, and I have a few ideas about what to do with a certain tech patent we just acquired." The elevator descended, carrying me away from the ruins of my old life and down toward the foundation of my new one. The victim was dead. The survivor was tired. But the CEO, she was wide awake. The family court building in Lower Manhattan smells like misery and cheap coffee. It is a place where love goes to die and where bank accounts go to be drained. I sat at the defendant's table, smoothing the fabric of my white dress. White was a strategic choice. It is the color of innocence, the color of truth. Next to me, Mr. Sterling arranged his files with the precision of a surgeon preparing for a heart transplant. He did not look nervous. He looked bored. And that was what terrified the opposition. Across the aisle, Julian sat next to a team of 3 lawyers. They were not his lawyers. They were Brad's lawyers. The Vanderwall family had sent their sharks to ensure that Julian did not say anything that could implicate them in his financial crimes. Julian looked surprisingly confident for a man who had been arrested by the IRS just days prior. He was out on bail, paid for by a loan shark, or perhaps he had sold the last of his watches. He wore a fresh suit, and he had that look on his face, the look that said he was the victim. He glanced at me and smirked. It was a small, subtle movement of his lips that said, "I am going to destroy you." The judge entered. Judge Patterson. She was a woman in her 60s with reading glasses perched on the end of her nose and a reputation for having zero patience for theatrics. She banged her gavel and the room fell silent. Mr. Finch, the lead lawyer for Julian, stood up. He was a man with a tan that was too dark and teeth that were too white. "Your Honor," he began, his voice dripping with faux sincerity, "we are here today to petition for an immediate dissolution of marriage and a 50-50 division of all marital and premarital assets. My client, Mr. Reynolds, has suffered immense emotional and reputational damage due to the respondent's instability." I watched Mr. Finch pace the floor. He was painting a picture, a masterpiece of fiction. "We will present evidence," Mr. Finch continued, "that Mrs. Reynolds has a history of substance abuse and violent outbursts. The injury she sustained to her leg was not an act of domestic violence, as she claims. It was a result of her throwing herself down the stairs in a fit of hysterical rage when my client attempted to leave her. She is manipulative. She is dangerous. And she has hidden millions of dollars in secret accounts while my client supported her. We demand access to those accounts." Julian nodded solemnly, wiping a fake tear from his eye. He was performing perfectly. He truly believed his own lies. He thought that because I had money, I must be the villain. He thought he could gaslight a judge the way he gaslighted me for 3 years. Mr. Sterling did not object. He did not jump up. He simply waited for Mr. Finch to finish his opening statement. When the judge finally looked our way, Mr. Sterling stood up. He did not walk to the center of the room. He stayed by my side. "Your Honor." Mr. Sterling said, his voice low and gravelly, "We do not have an opening statement. We believe the facts speak louder than adjectives. We would like to proceed directly to the submission of evidence regarding the incident on November 12th. Judge Patterson looked over her glasses. "Proceed, Counselor." Mr. Sterling picked up a remote control. He pointed it at the large monitor mounted on the wall. "Exhibit A." Mr. Sterling announced, "The medical report from the Onyx Medical Center Trauma Unit, verified by Dr. Eris Thorne, Chief of Orthopedic Surgery." An image appeared on the screen. It was an X-ray of my leg. The bone was not just broken, it was shattered. A spiral fracture that twisted up the tibia. Mr. Finch jumped up. "Objection. We have not authenticated these records. This is a private facility owned by the respondent's family." "Overruled," the judge snapped. "Sit down, Mr. Finch." Mr. Sterling continued, "As you can see, Your Honor, the nature of this fracture is inconsistent with a fall. A fall down wooden stairs typically results in bruising and perhaps a hairline fracture. This injury requires torque. It requires the foot to be planted while a massive force impacts the shin from a lateral angle." Sterling paused, letting the words sink in. "In layman's terms, Your Honor, this leg was not broken by gravity. It was broken by a stomp. A deliberate, violent stomp intended to disable the victim." Julian shifted in his seat. He looked at Brad, who was sitting in the back row. Brad did not look back. He was staring at his phone, typing furiously. Mr. Sterling clicked the remote again. "Exhibit B," he said. "Mr. Reynolds claims my client threw herself down the stairs. He claims he called for help immediately. He claims he is the victim." The screen changed. It was no longer a static image. It was a video. It was grainy and dark at first, lit only by the headlights of a vehicle. The time stamp in the corner read November 15th, 2 a.m. It was the dash cam footage from the lead SUV of the Onyx Security convoy. The courtroom watched in silence as the video played. The massive car smashed through the iron gates. Julian ran out onto the porch holding his drink. The audio was crystal clear, picked up by the tactical microphones on the vehicle. "I am the owner of this house," Julian's voice rang out in the quiet courtroom. Then Dante stepped out. "Where is she?" Dante asked in the video. "She is resting." Julian lied on screen. "She is not to be disturbed." Then came the damning part, the part Julian had forgotten. "You broke her leg," Dante said. Julian did not deny it in the video. He did not say she fell. He said it was an accident. "She is mentally unstable. We were protecting her." And then the moment that sucked the air out of the room. Dante asked, "You locked her in a basement, like a dog." And Julian replied, "We were waiting for the doctor." The video ended. The screen went black. The silence in the courtroom was heavy. It was the kind of silence that happens after a bomb goes off, but before the dust settles. Judge Patterson slowly turned her head. She looked at Julian. Her expression was not one of judicial neutrality. It was one of pure human disgust. "Mr. Reynolds," she said, her voice icy, "did you just admit on video to imprisoning your injured wife in a cellar for 3 days instead of calling 911? Julian stood up, his hands shaking. "Your Honor, that video is taken out of context. They are a paramilitary group. I was terrified. I said what they wanted to hear." "Sit down, Mr. Reynolds," the judge barked. But Mr. Sterling wasn't done. "One more thing, Your Honor, regarding the request for asset division." He pulled a final document from his briefcase. "Mr. Reynolds claims my client has hidden assets. That is true. Mrs. Reynolds is the beneficiary of a trust that manages significant real estate holdings. However, Mr. Reynolds seems to have forgotten the prenuptial agreement he signed 3 years ago. Mr. Finch looked confused. He whispered to Julian, "You said there was no prenup." Julian looked pale. I didn't think she kept it. It was just a napkin. We wrote it on a napkin at a diner." "It was not a napkin," Mr. Sterling said, holding up a notarized document. It was a binding contract witnessed by a notary public. Clause 4 states that, in the event of infidelity or abuse proved by a court of law, all marital assets revert to the victim, and the offending party forfeits all claims to spousal support. Sterling looked at Julian. "We have just proved abuse, Mr. Reynolds. And as for infidelity," he looked toward the back of the room. The doors opened. A woman walked in. It wasn't Chloe. It was the concierge from the St. Regis Hotel. She was carrying a subpoenaed log of guests. Julian slumped in his chair. He was done. He had lied to his lawyers. He had lied to the judge. And he had been caught in 4K resolution. Mr. Finch looked at the evidence. He looked at the judge, who was writing furiously on her notepad. Then he looked at Brad in the back of the room. Brad Vanderwall made a decision in that split second. He was a man who valued survival above all else. He saw the ship sinking, and he knew there was only one life raft. He stood up. He buttoned his jacket. He did not look at Julian. He looked at Mr. Finch and made a cutting motion across his throat. It was a universal signal. Cut him loose. Brad turned and walked out of the courtroom. The heavy wooden doors swung shut behind him. Julian turned around. "Brad," he whispered. "Brad, where are you going?" Mr. Finch began packing his briefcase. He stacked his files. He capped his expensive pen. "Mr. Finch," Julian hissed, grabbing his sleeve. "What are you doing?" "Object! Say something!" Mr. Finch pulled his arm away as if Julian were contagious. "I cannot represent a client who perjures himself, Mr. Reynolds. You are on your own." The 3 lawyers from the Vanderwall firm stood up in unison. They walked out following their boss, leaving Julian sitting alone at the large mahogany table. He looked small. He looked like a child who had lost his mother in a supermarket. The empty chairs beside him were a testament to his new reality. Judge Patterson looked down at him. "Mr. Reynolds, it seems your counsel has resigned. Do you have anything to say before I issue my ruling?" Julian looked at me. His eyes were wide and wet. "Brianna, please," he mouthed. I looked at him. I remembered the sound of my bones snapping. I remembered the taste of dust in the cellar. I remembered the wine burning my skin. I looked at Mr. Sterling. "We are ready for the ruling, Your Honor." The judge nodded. "Judgment is entered in favor of the respondent, Mrs. Reynolds. The marriage is dissolved. All assets currently held in joint accounts are awarded to Mrs. Reynolds. Furthermore, I am issuing an immediate restraining order. Mr. Reynolds, if you come within 500 feet of the plaintiff, you will be arrested." She banged the gavel. "And Mr. Reynolds," the judge added, taking off her glasses, "I am forwarding the transcript of this hearing and that video evidence to the district attorney. I believe they will be very interested in adding charges of kidnapping and aggravated assault to your current federal indictment. Bail is revoked. Bailiff, take him into custody." 2 officers stepped forward. They pulled Julian from his chair. He didn't fight this time. He was limp. He was broken. He looked at me one last time as they cuffed him. "Why?" he whispered. "Why didn't you just leave?" I stood up, leaning on my cane. "Because, Julian," I said, my voice carrying across the silent room, "you didn't just break my leg. You tried to break my spirit, and my spirit is worth a lot more than half a house." I watched them lead him away through the side door, the one reserved for prisoners. Mr. Sterling snapped his briefcase shut. "Well handled, Mrs. Reynolds," he said. I looked at the empty seat where my husband had sat. It wasn't well handled, Mr. Sterling. It was justice. I turned and walked out of the courtroom. The hallway no longer smelled like misery. It smelled like victory. I had my name back. I had my life back. And Julian Reynolds was about to learn that in the real world, actions have consequences that no amount of charm can fix. The divorce was just the paperwork. The real punishment was just beginning. The gavel had banged, but the echo was still ringing in my ears, like a church bell signaling a funeral. The courtroom began to clear, but Julian did not move. He couldn't move. The 2 federal marshals standing behind him had heavy hands on his shoulders, anchoring him to the reality he had tried so desperately to escape. I watched him from my standing position near the exit. My leg throbbed slightly, a reminder of the pain he had inflicted, but looking at him now, I felt no pain. I only felt the cold, clinical satisfaction of a surgeon who had successfully removed a tumor. Julian looked up at me. His eyes were red and frantic, darting around the room as if searching for a trapdoor. He still didn't understand the full scope of his destruction. He thought this was just a divorce ruling. He thought he would go to jail for a few months, maybe pay a fine, and then claw his way back up using the $10 million he had secured from Aurora Capital. He thought he still had a parachute. He had no idea I had already cut the cords. Mr. Silas, the man Julian thought was his savior, walked into the courtroom. He wasn't wearing his investor face today. He was wearing the face of an executioner. He walked right past the bar and approached the defense table where Julian was being prepped for transport. Julian's eyes lit up for a second. "Silas," he gasped, his voice desperate. "Thank God. Tell them. Tell them about the capital. I have funds, I can post bond, I can hire a real legal team." Silas stopped 3 feet away. He didn't offer a hand. He didn't smile. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a single red folder. He tossed it onto the table. It landed with a heavy slap right next to Julian's handcuffed wrists. "There are no funds, Mr. Reynolds," Silas said, his voice echoing in the emptying room. "And there is no bond." "What are you talking about?" Julian stammered, trying to reach for the file, but the marshal pulled him back. "We signed the deal. The money is in my account." Silas shook his head slowly. "The money was in your account. But as of this morning, when the IRS arrested you, that money was frozen. And per Clause 14B of our lending agreement, which you signed without reading any criminal indictment, triggers an immediate default." Julian stared at him, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "Default," he whispered. "Total default," Silas clarified. "And since you cannot repay the principal immediately, the collateral clause is activated." Silas leaned in, his eyes cold and dead. "We exercised the lien this morning, Julian. Aurora Capital now holds the deed to your Hamptons estate. We hold the title to your penthouse. We hold the keys to your cars. And we own 100% of your intellectual property, including the patent for your algorithm." Julian let out a sound that was half scream, half sob. "No, you can't do that. That is my life's work. That is everything I have." "It was everything you had," Silas corrected. "Now it is an asset on our balance sheet. You are bankrupt, Julian. You are homeless, and you are going to prison with $0 in your commissary account." The marshals signaled that it was time to move. They hauled Julian to his feet. The reality finally crashed down on him. The weight of it was crushing. He wasn't just losing his freedom. He was losing his identity. He wasn't Julian Reynolds, the tech CEO, anymore. He was inmate Reynolds, the destitute fraudster. "I have rights," Julian screamed, struggling against the grip of the officers. "I want my lawyer." "You don't have a lawyer," Silas called out, walking away. "You couldn't afford a public defender right now, even if you wanted one." They dragged him toward the side exit, the one that led to the holding cells and the transport van. I walked alongside them, staying just out of reach, separated by the wooden barrier. I wanted to see him walk down that hallway. I wanted to see the transition from man to statistic. As we reached the corridor, the press was waiting. Dante had tipped them off. Flashbulbs erupted like lightning, blinding us for a moment. Reporters shouted questions, asking about the fraud, asking about the abuse, asking about the fake charity gala. Julian tried to hide his face, but he couldn't lift his hands. "Get them away from me!" he yelled at the marshals. "Do you know who I am?" The lead marshal, a man with a neck like a tree trunk, just shoved him forward. "Move it, Reynolds." They reached the heavy steel doors of the elevator. The officers pressed the button. Julian spun around looking for anyone who could help him. He saw Brad standing at the far end of the hallway trying to sneak away. "Brad," Julian screamed. "Do something! Call the governor. We have leverage." Brad didn't even turn around. He walked faster, disappearing around the corner, leaving Julian completely alone. Julian turned his wild eyes to me, and then to Dante, who was standing next to me adjusting his cufflinks. The desperation in Julian's eyes turned into a manic fury. He couldn't accept that he had lost to us. to the street trash he thought he had married. "You think you won?" He spat at me, saliva flying from his lips. "You are nothing, Brianna. You are just a girl from the block who got lucky. I am a CEO. I built something. I have connections in this city that you can't even dream of." He looked at the marshals, trying to pull rank. "I demand to speak to the warden. I have friends in the Senate. You cannot put me in general population. I am a white-collar executive." The elevator arrived with a ding. The doors slid open, revealing the metal cage inside. Dante stepped forward. He moved smoothly, signaling the marshals to pause for just a second. The marshals, knowing who Dante was and respecting the power of Onyx Security, stepped back slightly, allowing my brother to step into Julian's personal space. Dante reached out. Julian flinched, thinking he was going to be hit. But Dante didn't make a fist. He reached out and gently straightened Julian's tie, which had become crooked during the struggle. He smoothed the lapel of the suit jacket that Julian would be trading for an orange jumpsuit in less than an hour. Julian was panting, trembling with rage and fear. "You can't touch me," he hissed. "I know people." Dante smiled. It was a terrifying smile. It was the smile of a wolf looking at a rabbit that thought it was a king. "You don't know anyone, Julian." Dante said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the floor. "You think because you went to a few galas and shook a few hands that you are part of the club, but you never were. You were just the entertainment." Dante tightened the knot on Julian's tie, just enough to make it uncomfortable, just enough to remind him who had the control. "You screamed that you are a CEO." Dante continued, soft and lethal. "But let's be honest, you were just a glorified employee for your brother-in-law. You managed his money, you married his reject, you played the part, but you never owned anything." Julian tried to pull away, but he was paralyzed by the truth in Dante's eyes. "And as for your connections," Dante whispered, leaning closer so only Julian could hear, "you are going to a federal facility in upstate New York, maximum security wing because of the kidnapping charge. 15 years, Julian. 15 years in a box." Julian swallowed hard sweat dripping down his nose. "So what?" he stammered, trying to maintain a shred of dignity. "I will be out in 7 for good behavior. I will run the place. I have management skills." Dante laughed, a short, sharp sound. "You think you are going to run the place?" Dante patted Julian on the cheek. A patronizing tap. "I own the facility, Julian." The color drained from Julian's face so fast he looked like a corpse. His eyes widened until the whites showed all around the irises. "What?" Julian whispered. "Onyx Security," Dante said casually. "We just won the government contract to manage the privatized federal detention centers in the tri-state area. The guards who will lock your cell at night work for me. The warden who denies your visitation rights answers to me. The commissary that you can't afford is stocked by my trucks." Dante stepped back, admiring the look of absolute terror on Julian's face. It was the look of a man realizing he had just walked into hell and the devil was his brother-in-law. "You are not going to prison," Dante said. "You are coming to my house. And in my house we have very strict rules for men who hurt women." "No!" Julian screamed, his voice cracking into a high-pitched wail. "No, please. Officer, don't let him. That is a conflict of interest. You can't send me there." The marshals grabbed him. They didn't care about conflicts of interest. They just wanted to process the prisoner. "Let's go, CEO," the lead marshal said, shoving him into the elevator. Julian fought now. He fought with the desperation of a drowning man. He dug his heels into the linoleum. He screamed my name. "Brianna, help me. Don't let him take me. I will sign anything. I will give you the money back. Just don't let him put me in there." I stepped forward, leaning on my cane. I looked him dead in the eye as the doors began to close. "You have nothing to give me, Julian," I said. "I already took it all." The doors slid shut, cutting off his scream mid-note. We stood in the hallway, listening to the mechanical whir of the elevator descending, taking my husband down to the basement, down to the transport van, down to a world owned by the family he had called low class. I let out a long, slow breath. The tension that had held my body together for weeks finally released. My shoulders dropped. Dante turned to me, fixing his own cuffs. "Do I really own that prison?" he asked with a wink. I smiled, grabbing his arm for support. "You own the security contract," I said. "Close enough." Dante chuckled, putting his arm around me. He doesn't know the difference. And for the next 15 years, every time a guard walks by his cell, he is going to wonder if I sent him. That kind of fear is better than any beating I could have given him. We walked toward the exit, the sunlight streaming in through the glass doors. It was over. The checkmate was complete. Julian was gone, erased from the board, and I was standing tall. I wasn't just a survivor of domestic abuse. I was the woman who had turned her trauma into a weapon and fired it with perfect precision. I stepped out into the fresh air, ready to start the first day of the rest of my life. The nightmare was behind bars, and the world was wide open. The Hamptons air used to smell like isolation. It used to smell like manicured lawns that you were not allowed to walk on, and silent rooms where you were not allowed to speak. But 6 months later, as I stood on the back terrace looking out over the ocean, the air smelled different. It smelled like salt and wild grass, and most importantly, it smelled like freedom. I took a sip of my coffee and adjusted my stance. My right leg still carried a ghost of the fracture, a slight hitch in my step that appeared when it rained or when I was tired. The doctor said it might never go away completely, but I did not mind. I did not hide it. I wore that limp like a medal of honor. It was the physical proof that I had been broken and I had knit myself back together stronger than before. I turned away from the view and looked at the house, Julian's precious estate, the monument to his ego. It looked different now. The cold gray walls were covered in warm climbing ivy. The imposing iron gates stood wide open, and the silence was gone. The house was alive with the sound of voices, not the hushed whispers of fearful wives, but the loud, boisterous laughter of women who were learning to breathe again. I walked through the French doors into the main living room. The beige furniture was gone, replaced by vibrant sofas and communal tables. This was no longer a private residence. It was the Phoenix Foundation, a transitional sanctuary for women escaping high-net-worth domestic abuse. Women who, like me, had been trapped in gilded cages. Women whose husbands used money as a weapon to silence them. I walked past the kitchen where a group of residents were cooking breakfast. They waved at me. I waved back. I continued down the hall toward the door that used to terrify me. The heavy oak door to the wine cellar. I opened it. The darkness was gone. We had installed floor-to-ceiling glass panels on the far wall, digging out the earth to let the sunlight flood in. The damp concrete floor was covered in plush rugs. The racks that once held $50,000 worth of wine had been ripped out. In their place were bookshelves filled with legal texts, guides on financial literacy, and stories of survival. The room where I had screamed in the dark was now the brightest room in the house. It was our legal clinic. It was where we helped women file for divorce, find hidden assets, and reclaim their lives. I stood there for a moment, letting the sun warm my face. I thought about Julian sitting in his cell in upstate New York. I wondered if he knew what had become of his wine cellar. I wondered if he knew that the very room he used to torture me was now the engine room of his destruction. A shadow fell across the doorway. I turned around. Dante was leaning against the frame wearing a casual black polo shirt and sunglasses. He looked relaxed. He looked happy. "Nice place you got here," he said, his voice echoing in the renovated space, a little less creepy than the last time I visited. I smiled, walking over to him. My cane clicked softly on the floor, a rhythmic beat that I had come to love. "It is getting there. We have 12 residents already, and 3 more arriving next week." Dante nodded, looking around. "You did good, Bree. You took a haunted house and you exorcised the ghosts." I walked past him, leading him back up the stairs and out onto the front porch. The driveway was filled with cars, not luxury sports cars, but practical SUVs and moving vans. "I have something for you," I said, stopping by the railing. Dante raised an eyebrow. "You already gave me the patent for the algorithm. The company is making a fortune." "This is different," I said, picking up a leather folder from the patio table. I handed it to him. He opened it, scanning the document. A slow grin spread across his face. "Director of Security," he read, "for the Phoenix Foundation." I leaned against the railing. "These women need protection, Dante. Their husbands are powerful men, men with resources, men like Julian. We need someone who understands how those men think. We need someone who can stand at that gate and make sure that nothing bad ever walks through it again. Dante looked at the contract. The salary line was blank. I can't pay you what you are worth, I said. But the benefits are pretty good. You get free coffee. And you get to know that you are the reason these women sleep soundly at night. Dante closed the folder. He pulled a pen from his pocket and signed it without hesitation. I don't need the money, he said, handing it back. I am in. But under one condition. What is that, I asked. Dante pointed to the driveway. A brand new car was parked there, a convertible, bright red. You stop driving that sensible sedan, he said. You are a CEO now. You need to look like one. I laughed, a sound that came from deep in my belly. It felt good to laugh. It felt good to be alive. I looked at my brother, the man who had broken laws to save me, the man who had walked into fire so I wouldn't burn. Thank you, I whispered, for everything. Dante pulled me into a hug. He felt like armor. He felt like home. Don't thank me, Bree, he said softly. You did the heavy lifting. I just cleared the road. We stood there for a moment watching the wind blow through the trees. I thought about the journey. I thought about the fear. I thought about the night I lay on the floor believing my life was over. I realized now that it wasn't an ending. It was an incubation. I pulled away and looked directly into the camera, breaking the fourth wall for the final time. To everyone watching this who feels trapped. To everyone who feels like they are too small to fight back. Listen to me. They broke my leg because they wanted to make sure I couldn't run away. They thought that if they took away my ability to walk, I would stay in my place. But they forgot the most important rule of survival. When you are cornered, when you are broken, when you cannot run, you are forced to do something else. You are forced to evolve. They broke my leg so I couldn't run. But they forgot that when you cannot run, you must learn how to fly. I looked at Dante, who was putting on his sunglasses, looking out at the perimeter like the guardian he was. And my brother. He wasn't just my savior. He was the wind beneath me. He was the wings of fire that carried me out of the ashes. I turned back to the view, my head held high, my broken leg planting firmly on the ground I owned. My name is Brianna. I am not a victim. I am the fire that burned the house down, and I am just getting warm. Hit that like button if you are ready to fly. And subscribe because the story isn't over. It is just a new chapter. And this time, I am holding the pen. Brianna's story is a powerful testament to the unshakable resilience of the human spirit. It teaches us that our greatest power often lies dormant until we are pushed to our absolute breaking point. Julian made the fatal mistake of confusing silence with submission and kindness with weakness. He believed that by stripping Brianna of her mobility, he could strip her of her agency. But he learned the hard way that you cannot break a woman who has already survived the fire. The most profound lesson here is that betrayal, while devastating, brings the gift of clarity. When Julian locked that cellar door, he didn't just lock his wife away. He locked away the only person who was truly loyal to him. In doing so, he forced Brianna to remember who she was before she became his wife. She rediscovered that her value was not defined by his approval, but by her own internal strength. Furthermore, this narrative reveals that true justice is not about noise, it is about strategy. Brianna didn't scream for help. She planned. She turned her trauma into a tactical advantage. She showed us that when life breaks your legs, you don't just learn to crawl. You build wings. You surround yourself with people who treat you like royalty, not those who treat you like a burden. In the end, the best revenge isn't just seeing your enemy fall. It is rising so high that they can no longer reach you. If this story ignited a fire in you, and if you believe that no one has the right to dim your light, please hit that like button. Share this video with a woman who needs to be reminded of her power. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. We are building a community of survivors and queens here, and I want you to be part of our next chapter. Until next time, keep your head up and your crown straight.